It was a regular Friday afternoon, or so I thought. I'd just gotten home from work, the usual grind at the hardware store. It was the kind of evening where you could almost forget your worries, almost. Marcy was in the shower, and I was about to grab a cold beer when I saw her phone buzzing on the nightstand. Usually, I wouldn't give it a second thought. 25 years of marriage teaches you to trust, right? But something was different this time. Call it a gut feeling, call it whatever you want, but I knew I had to check. I picked up the phone, and there was a message from someone named Bobo. Bobo? Who the hell was Bobo? My hand started shaking as I opened the message. The words hit me like a freight train. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same hotel as last time. Winky face. I miss you so much. Can't wait to be in your arms again. I felt my heart stop. Marcy, my Marcy, was cheating on me, and she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I scrolled up, and it just got worse. She was planning romantic weekends, sneaking off to hotels, all while I was here, thinking we were fine. The worst part? The picture she sent, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. My world shattered right there. The water shut off in the bathroom, and I heard her humming to herself like nothing was wrong. I should have just put the phone down, but I couldn't. The anger was boiling over, and I wasn't going to keep quiet. I stormed into the bathroom, not even thinking about what I was going to say. Marcy was just stepping out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, looking all innocent. She saw my face, and her smile faded. Jim? What's going on? I held up her phone, my voice shaking with rage. Who the hell is Bobo? For a second, she just stared at me. I expected her to lie, to make up some excuse. But then she did something that knocked the wind out of me. She looked relieved, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. You found out, she said, her voice calm, almost like she was glad. That's it? That's all you have to say? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She sighed, like this was something she'd been dreading, but also waiting for. I didn't want it to happen like this, Jim, but maybe it's better that it's out in the open. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Better? How the hell is this better, Marcy? How long has this been going on? A while, she admitted, not meeting my eyes. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. You know that. So, you just decided to screw around behind my back? With some guy named Bobo. The name tasted bitter in my mouth. She didn't even flinch. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. And now, we have to figure out what happens next. I couldn't breathe. This was the woman I'd built a life with, and she was talking like we were discussing the weather, not our marriage falling apart. Who is he? I demanded, my voice barely more than a whisper. It doesn't matter, she said, shaking her head. What matters is where we go from here. I stared at her, my mind racing, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. But one thing was crystal clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. After the bombshell with Bobo, things between Marcy and me were tense, to put it mildly. One night, not long after I found out, we were sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but I wasn't paying attention. Marcy was pretending to read a book, but I knew she was just as distracted as I was. Then, out of nowhere, she put the book down and looked at me, her eyes sharper than I'd seen in weeks. Jim, she started, her voice steady but with a strange edge. I've been thinking. About what? I muttered, not in the mood for another one of her talks. About us, she said, leaning forward. About how we move past this. I scoffed. Move past it? You think we can just move past you screwing around behind my back? She didn't flinch, just kept looking at me with that intense gaze. I know I hurt you, Jim, and I'm sorry. But maybe there's a way to make this right. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Make it right? How the hell do you make something like this right? She paused, like she was choosing her words carefully. You said you wanted things to be fair, right? You're angry because I did something you never did. I get that. So, what if I told you to go out and do the same? Find someone, have your fun, and then maybe we can start over. It took me a second to realize what she was suggesting. My jaw dropped. You're saying you want me to cheat? To get even? She shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why not? It's only fair. You find someone, have a good time, and then maybe, just maybe, we can call it even. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around it. Was she serious? Here I was, still reeling from her betrayal, and she was suggesting I go out and cheat like it was some kind of therapy. The idea of it twisted my stomach, but at the same time, there was a sick logic to it. If she could do it and sleep at night, why couldn't I? But the truth was I was still too damn hurt. The thought of being with another woman didn't excite me. It just reminded me of how far we'd fallen. So I agreed, but not because I wanted to. I agreed because I didn't know what else to do. Then, one day, Marcy came home from the gym with a look I hadn't seen in a long time, like she was about to drop another bomb on me. She waited until we were in the kitchen, then leaned against the counter, a sly smile tugging at her lips. "I've been thinking," she said, and my stomach twisted at those words. "About what?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know. "About what we talked about," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "About you finding someone else." I sighed. "Marcy, I told you I'm not—" I know," she cut me off, holding up a hand. "But what if I helped? What if I introduced you to someone?" I raised an eyebrow, completely thrown off. "You want to set me up with someone? Seriously?" She nodded, her smile widening. "There's this woman at the gym. She's hot, young, and, well, I think you two might hit it off." My mind was reeling. This was insane. Was she actually suggesting what I thought she was? And what? You're just going to tell her I'm your husband looking for a fling? Marcy laughed, shaking her head. "Of course not. I told her you're my cousin, and that you're new in town, looking to meet people. She doesn't know anything about us. As far as she's concerned, you're just a guy who needs a little excitement in his life." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was a whole new level of twisted. But then a part of me, the part that was still smarting from the betrayal, thought, why the hell not? Maybe this was what I needed. Maybe this was how I could get even. "When do I meet her?" I asked, my voice low. Marcy's eyes sparkled with something dark. "Tomorrow night. I'll make the introductions and then, well, the rest is up to you." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread. This was it, the next step in whatever the hell our marriage had become. I didn't know where it would lead, but one thing was for sure. It was going to be one hell of a ride. The next night, I walked into that dimly lit bar, expecting awkwardness, maybe even regret. What I didn't expect was Lexi. The moment she strolled in, with her high heels clicking against the floor and that confident sway in her hips, she turned heads, and mine was the first. She was fiery, full of life, and had a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. It was like she had this invisible energy, something magnetic that pulled you in before you could think twice. She wasn't just beautiful, she was a damn firecracker. The kind of woman who laughed loudly, wasn't afraid to say what was on her mind, and could turn the most mundane conversation into something electric. Our first date was supposed to be a one-time thing, but the moment she sat down, flashed me a wicked grin, and told me a story about how she almost punched a guy at the gym for hitting on her, I knew I was hooked. I couldn't help but laugh, a real, deep laugh that I hadn't felt in years. There was something about Lexi that made me forget, even if just for a moment, about the mess waiting for me back home. So, one date turned into two, then three. Each time we met, it felt like I was peeling back another layer of her, discovering new sides to this woman who was nothing like I expected. She was bold, unfiltered, and didn't take crap from anyone. It was like she was everything Marcy used to be before life ground her down into someone I barely recognized. The strangest part? Marcy was all for it. Every time I came home, she'd ask how it went, pushing for details with an enthusiasm that made my head spin. She even started giving me dating advice, like we were teenagers again, and she was setting me up with the prom queen. "Wear the blue shirt," she'd say. "Lexi will love it." Or, "Take her to that new Italian place. She's a sucker for good pasta." It was surreal. Here I was seeing another woman with my wife's blessing. Hell, with her encouragement. But there was something in the back of my mind that kept itching, a sense that something wasn't right. This wasn't normal. But Lexi was like a drug, and every time I was with her, that nagging feeling got drowned out by her infectious energy. Then came the night that shattered everything. Marcy came home one evening with that look, like she was about to pull the rug out from under me again. We were sitting at the dinner table, just the two of us, when she said it, her voice smooth and sweet like she was offering dessert. "Jim, I think it's time you and Lexi met properly." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" I already know her. No, Marcy said, her eyes glinting with something dark. I mean, really met her. She's coming over tonight. It felt like the ground shifted beneath me. Invite Lexi here? To our home? With both of us? The thought alone made my head spin. The next second, Lexi showed up at our door, looking as stunning as ever, her eyes sparkling with mischief. But something felt off. The air was thick with tension, and I could see it in her eyes too. She knew something was up. But like the firecracker Lexi didn't back down. She walked into that house like she owned the place, flashing that wicked grin that had me hooked from the start. We sat down to dinner, and at first it was almost normal. But there was an undercurrent, something simmering just below the surface. Then Marcy started dropping hints, little breadcrumbs that didn't make sense, at least not until she dropped the bomb. Jim, Marcy said, leaning back in her chair, her voice deceptively calm. There's something you should know. I felt a chill run down my spine. What? Lexi and I. We've been seeing each other for a while now. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I stared at her, then at Lexi, who was looking at me with those same eyes that had captivated me, but now with something else, something like pity. What? I breathed, the room spinning around me. Lexi reached across the table, taking Marcy's hand, her fiery spirit suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. We didn't want to keep it from you anymore, she said softly, her voice almost soothing. We thought you deserved to know. Know what? I demanded, my voice cracking. Marcy's smile widened, that wicked edge sharpening. We've been seeing each other, Jim, and now we want you to be a part of it. All of us, together. The pieces fell into place, and the realization knocked the wind out of me. Lexi wasn't just some random fling. She was part of the plan, part of Marcy's twisted game. They'd set me up, played me like a fool, and now they wanted me to just fall in line. A three-person marriage? The words echoed in my mind, each one a nail in the coffin of whatever I thought my life was. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I knew was I had to get out of there, away from these two women who had just ripped my world apart. I ran out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind reeling. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I had to get away, before the twisted reality of what had just happened swallowed me whole. I spent that night driving around. A part of me wanted to run, to leave them both behind and never look back. But if I left, they'd win. They'd get their twisted happily ever after while I'd be left with nothing but the shards of my broken marriage and a bruised ego. And I couldn't have that. No way in hell. Then there was Lexi. Despite everything, I couldn't shake how I felt about her. She was wild, unpredictable, and had a fire that drew me in like a moth to a flame. But now I knew she was in on it from the start, part of Marcy's plan to humiliate me. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. But the more I thought about it, the more a new idea started to take shape. If they wanted me to be a part of their little game, fine, but I'd be the one calling the shots. I'd turn the tables on them, make them regret ever thinking they could play me like a fool. I decided to stay. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, finding Marcy and Lexi already there, chatting over coffee like it was the most normal thing in the world. They both looked up when I entered, and I could see the anticipation in their eyes. They were waiting for my reaction, wondering if I'd bolt or play along. Morning, I said, keeping my voice casual like nothing was out of the ordinary. Marcy raised an eyebrow. Morning. You okay? I shrugged, pouring myself a cup of coffee. I've been thinking about what you said last night. Lexi tilted her head, curiosity sparking in her eyes. And I've decided to stay, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. But on one condition. Marcy's eyes narrowed. What condition? If we're really going to do this, I said slowly, then I get to decide how it works. Who's with who and when. I need to know I'm not just a third wheel in whatever you two have going on. They both exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Then Marcy nodded. Okay, Jim, you call the shots. I could see Lexi wasn't entirely thrilled with the idea, but she didn't protest. Maybe she thought it was just a small concession, something to keep me on board. But she had no idea what I had in mind. It started with small, almost imperceptible moves. I knew that Marcy thrived on control, that she couldn't stand the idea of things slipping out of her grasp. So I played into her insecurities, dropping subtle hints that Lexi was losing interest, that maybe she wasn't as invested as she claimed to be. She's been distant lately, I'd say casually as we sat on the couch one evening. I don't know, maybe she's just got a lot on her mind. Marcy frowned, her eyes narrowing. Distant how? I don't know, just distracted. Like she's not really here when she's with us. Maybe she's bored. Marcy didn't respond, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She didn't like the idea of losing control, of someone slipping through her fingers. I knew it was only a matter of time before she started questioning Lexi, pushing her for answers. Lexi, on the other hand, was a firecracker, full of passion and energy. She hated feeling caged, and Marcy's increasing paranoia played right into that. I started feeding Lexi's ego, making her feel like she was the star of the show, the one who deserved all the attention. You know, I said one day as we were out for a drink, "You're too good to be put in a box. Marcy should be grateful to have you, not questioning you all the time." Lexi's eyes sparked with anger. Exactly. I'm with her because I choose to be, not because I have to be. I nodded sympathetically, adding fuel to the fire. You deserve someone who appreciates you for who you are, not someone who's constantly trying to control you. The more I stoked their individual insecurities, the more they started to unravel. Marcy became increasingly suspicious, constantly questioning Lexi's whereabouts, her intentions, her commitment. Lexi, in turn, became more defiant, more resentful of Marcy's attempts to control her. The tension between them grew thicker by the day, and I watched with satisfaction as their relationship began to fray at the edges. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to push them over the edge. One evening, as the three of us were having dinner, I decided to set my final trap. I casually mentioned that I'd been getting texts from an old friend, a woman I used to know before I met Marcy. She reached out of the blue, I said, glancing at my phone. Wants to catch up, maybe grab a drink. Marcy's eyes flicked up from her plate, a hint of jealousy flashing across her face. Oh, and who's this friend? Just someone from the past, I replied with a shrug. Nothing serious, just catching up. Lexi, ever the instigator, smirked. Maybe you should go. You know, see if there's still a spark. Marcy shot her a look, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She didn't like the idea of me reconnecting with someone else, especially not when she felt her grip on Lexi slipping. A few days later, I left my phone out on the counter, the screen conveniently lighting up with a message from this so-called friend. Marcy saw it, her face hardening as she read the flirtatious tone of the text. She didn't confront me directly. Instead, she stewed in her jealousy, letting it fester. I knew Marcy well enough to know that she'd eventually break. Sure enough, one night, after I'd gone out with my old friend, I came home to find Marcy in a cold fury. "Who the hell is this woman, Jim?" she demanded, shoving my phone in my face. I played it cool, acting surprised. "Just an old friend. I told you about her." "Old friend my ass," Marcy snapped. "You've been sneaking around behind my back, haven't you?" "Marcy, you're overreacting," I said, trying to sound calm, but inwardly enjoying every moment of this. But she wasn't having it. Her paranoia had taken over, and she was convinced that I was cheating on her just like she had cheated on me. And the irony of it all was delicious. Meanwhile, I kept Lexi on edge by hinting that Marcy was considering ending things, that maybe she was too overwhelmed by jealousy to keep this whole arrangement going. "I don't know, Lexi," I said one day as we sat on a bench at the park. "Marcy's been talking about needing space, about rethinking everything. I think she's just scared of losing control." Lexi's eyes flashed with anger. "She's scared of losing control? Over me? Maybe I should be the one rethinking things." That night, the fight between them erupted into something I could only describe as a spectacle. Marcy accused Lexi of being unfaithful, of wanting out. Lexi fired back, accusing Marcy of trying to smother her, of being too possessive, of ruining what they had. I stood by, pretending to be the peacemaker, but in reality, I was relishing the chaos. Every word, every accusation, was another brick crumbling in the wall they'd built around me. Then, I dropped the final bomb. "I don't think this is working," I said quietly, but loud enough for them both to hear. Maybe it's time we all go our separate ways. Marcy looked at me, shock and hurt flashing across her face. Lexi just stared, her fiery spirit finally extinguished by the weight of everything that had happened. We tried, I continued, keeping my tone even measured, but maybe some things just aren't meant to be. The silence that followed was deafening. They both knew it was over, and they had no one to blame but each other. I packed my bags that night, leaving them to stew in the mess they'd created. I didn't say goodbye, didn't look back as I walked out the door and into the night. The following days were a whirlwind. I hired a lawyer who specialized in high-stakes divorces. I presented the evidence, the incriminating messages, the manipulative games Marcy and Lexi had played, and my lawyer went to work. Marcy, still reeling from the fallout of our confrontation, was caught off guard. She didn't expect me to fight back so hard. Her initial attempts to negotiate were half-hearted, hoping I'd take a quick and easy settlement. But I wasn't interested. I wanted to make sure she faced the full impact of her deceit. I leveraged the evidence I had, pushing for a settlement that would leave Marcy with very little. She tried to contest the division of assets, but the court saw her as the instigator and sided with me. I walked away with the house, a significant portion of our savings, and full control of the joint investments we had. Marcy was left with a fraction of what she'd hoped for, enough to get by, but far less than she was used to. Lexi's standing in the community took a major hit. Rumors about her involvement with Marcy, and subsequently with me, spread quickly. Though Lexi tried to contact me, I kept my distance. The truth was I didn't need her anymore. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I'd never let anyone try to control me again. I was done being the nice guy, the one who played by the rules while everyone else took advantage. From now on, I was in charge of my own destiny.